Let us start by creating a new project, Spring Starter project. So I'm gonna give the name of the project as Project Flyway, description as well. I'm not going to change any of the properties here. Next, the first thing what I need is to have, so we have the Spring Web here itself. I would like to add the Spring Data JPA and also the Flyway migration MariaDB driver. This is because I'm using the MariaDB as the backend database. So next, finish. We have the project here. I'll make the necessary changes and be back. You can see the database configuration for the Flyway is same as that of the database connection configuration. We'll see the reason for that and also what can be done for that. So when we added Flyway, it also created a folder called DB, and within this DB directory, another directory called migration. So we did not create this just because Flyway dependency was added. It has created these two directories within the SRC main resources. So what I have done is I have created a SQL file here. It's already open. This one, the name, you can see v1 followed by 2 underscores. It contains the data definition language to create a user detail table, and then we have 4 insert queries. We haven't enabled the Flyway yet. Let me also show you the database before starting the application. Here is the database, the MariaDB database connection. I'm using dbeaver. The database name is project_db. Let me also show you the configuration. Edit connection. So the database name is project_db. The username for the connection is root and password is also root. The port number is 3306. And this doesn't contain any tables yet. Let's go back and just click here, run as Spring Boot. So it shows that it has been successfully started. Let's go to the database and see if there are any table creation. Refresh. You can see here there is a table with name Flyway_schema_history and the user detail table which we had entered in the SQL file. Scrooge and all these 4 entries you can see here. Even though we have not enabled the usage of this Flyway dependency, we did not configure any property of name spring dot flyway dot enabled equals true here. This is because the value for this property is by default true. Let's see if whatever I'm telling is true. Just press Ctrl and click. You'll be routed to this Flyway properties file. Let's go to this property. You can see here it has been annotated with configurations properties and the prefix is spring.flyway.enabled equals true. The default value for this enabled property is always true, and hence even if you do not provide this property, Spring Boot by default enables the Flyway. Let us first confirm if the application run was connecting to the through Flyway properties itself. I'll just change the username here, save and click on run. You can see the connection has been failed or the server startup has not worked because the access is denied for this user. So this shows that Spring Boot was using these properties to connect to the database for the Flyway functionality to work. I'm going to remove these properties, delete, save, and let's delete these 2 tables as well. Delete. Now there's nothing. F5, nothing is there. And I'll start the application. There's no error. And if you see here F5, you can see the Flyway schema history table is also created and user detail table is also created, which means these properties, whatever the properties we had added here, these are not mandatory. In a sense, If these properties are not provided, what Flyway does is Flyway uses the property values which are specified in Spring Data Source URL, Spring Data Source username, and Spring Data Source password. The reason to provide these properties explicitly is there could be a requirement wherein you want to connect to another database for the data migration, and you might be connecting to some other database. So it all depends on the requirement. They have provided this flexibility. If you do not provide these properties, so it will just take the properties from the Spring Data Source. So now I'll just remove those properties, and we will not use those properties because anyhow I'm using the same database connection for Flyway as well as my application. Stop the server. Flyway by default creates a table with name flyway_schema_history, and whenever a migration takes place, the Flyway makes an insertion in Flyway schema history table so that there is no rerun of these files if they are already existing. What I mean is, if in your first deployment, if you have these files and have been executed, in your next deployment you introduce new files and you execute it again, the Flyway is not going to execute the file which was run in the first release. Let me delete it again. The file name follows a specific rule, which is the migration file should start with letter V and then followed by the version, then 2 underscores, and then description .SQL. If you provide a file name other than this format, that file is not going to be picked up by Flyway, and the execution or the migration doesn't take place for that specific file. So this we need to keep in mind, and we'll see if we can make changes for these properties. We have seen that the migration has been done using this SQL file. Flyway also provides the migration flexibility to be done using the Java code as well. I have created a Java file here for that explanation. So even here it is the same. You need to have the class name according to the rule which I have specified here, except you will not have this .SQL in this Java file. I have version v1. I cannot use v1 for this class name, and also I'll be creating some other files for v2 and v3, and that's the reason I have given the name for this file as v4. You can see here this class is extending base Java migration. So whenever you are creating a class for the migration, for the Flyway migration, your file should either extend base Java migration or it should implement the interface Java migration. Let's go in here. If you can see, the base Java migration file is implementing Java migration. It's a good practice to use base migration instead of implementing the Java migration interface. And within this migrate method, which is being overridden here, what I'm doing is I'm inserting another entry with value 5. If you see here in the SQL, we have only 4 entries in the user detail table, and here I'm trying to make a 5th entry, launchpad McQuack. For this class to be executed, we need a bean of this class, and that's the reason I am annotating it with the @component. Let us try and run and see. Also, before starting, we'll see F5, there is nothing in here. Go and start. Server has started successfully. We'll see if the changes are reflecting Flyway schema history, user detail, launchpad. So the 5th entry, which was being added through the Java migration, is also reflected in the database. Alright, let me delete these two. Delete. Let us come back to the naming rule for the file. Can we change these property naming rules? Yes, we can. So we can change the rule for having starting character or the characters, and then we can change the property for having double underscores and also .SQL. For that, what we'll do is we will spring.flyway.sql migration prefix equals, I'll just give t. So this is just to test spring.flyway.sql migration suffixes equals .txt. spring.flyway.sql migration separator equals hyphen. So I have changed these three, and we have also deleted the database tables. Thing is there. Let me start the application and see what it says. User detail doesn't exist. So this error we are getting because the SQL file hasn't been executed, but the Java file is trying to execute and trying to insert the value. So I'll explain that as well. Because we added these properties, or we have changed or overridden these property name, property values, what Flyway expects is your file name should start with T. Here we have V, and you should have a hyphen separator. We have double underscore, and its suffix should be .txt, but we have SQL. In contrast, in this Java migration, the name of this class doesn't change based on the properties. This is because what they have done here is they have hard-coded the values. I'll just show you that as well. Here, if you go in here, you can see they have hard-coded all these values. No matter what you give in the application.properties, it always expects you to have the default properties in the Java file migration. And that is the reason when I started the application, the SQL file did not execute, but the Java file was executing and trying to insert an entry into the table which doesn't exist. Now let us change the name of this, reformat, rename. F2, I'll do it. T, remove these and put a hyphen, and instead of .sql, .txt. Enter. Now let us see if this works. Okay, we need to revert the entry of this table as well, because our migration was unsuccessful. I'm just deleting this. You can see there is no entry, and start. Now you can see the migration is successful. Let's see, refresh, and you can see two entries here, T1 hyphen first changes. It is successful, both of them are successful, and the entries, you can see these entries are from the SQL and this is from the Java file. What if we have an error in one of the queries in this migration? Let us say here, instead of having integer, we had a character or a string. And let me delete this again. I'm deleting them again and again because I'm not creating any new data. I'm just playing with the same data. Changed it to this one, and let's start. It fails, and the reason it gives is okay, because the value of the column is the scale. Let's see the database if there are any changes. F5, you can see here the table is already created, but the entries are not created, which means whenever we are running or migrating in one specific file, the whole file will be transactional. In a sense, if something fails, then everything will be rolled back. If you see here, insert 1, insert 2 was before this failure, but these two entries are not there in the database because the whole stuff was transactional, and the creation or the data definition language was also transactional. Even though this was transactional, it has been created. The reason behind this is MariaDB or MySQL does an internal commit for the data definition language query executions, and that is the reason the table was created here, but there was no entry. Let me delete this table again. Delete. Now what I will do is I'll try to move these into separate files and see what happens. New file t2 hyphen insertion 1.txt. I'll copy these two entries, Control X, Control V, and another file t3 hyphen insertion 2.txt. Control X, and let's go to t3, paste, save. Now still the error is there. What I mean is, I still have the scenario of creating an error whenever the application starts. Let's see if the transactional, at least anyhow we do not have this transactional for DDL in the MySQL, so this is going to create irrespective of having an error or not having an error. We'll just try to see for insertion queries in different files. In real world applications, we'll have these kind of scenarios wherein we will have more than one file with the queries in one whatever release or deployment. So we are just trying to recreate that scenario and have an error in one of the files. We have already deleted the tables. Go in here, start the application. It has failed. Let's see. 5. The table is created as usual, but the two entries are also added because the error was not there in the file T2, which had these entries of 1 and 2, 1 and 2, but the error was in the third file, and that's the reason there's no entry after that, and also not even from the Java's transaction, because this is labeled with v4. This will be executed once 1, 2 and 3 are executed, and in third itself we have the exception. The rest of the queries are failed. What we can do for this? So in this scenario, what if I want to roll back all the changes? Yes, of course, DDL in this MariaDB changes. What can we do? For that, what we can do is we will add a property spring.flyway.group equals true. If we set this property as true, what happens is all of the files, the new files in this deployment or the run, will be executed, and if there is some problem in one of the files, then all the queries will be rolled back, which means these two entries should also not occur in our next run. Delete, go in here, start the application. It has failed. Let's see. 5 table is created because MariaDB, but no entries even if I refresh. Since MariaDB does internal commit for DDLs, it doesn't sound right or proper to use this property, and it can be used or will be useful for the databases which do not have any internal commits for DDLs. The table which has the schema history or the logs, can we rename this table? Let us see. Yes, we can. We have spring dot flyway dot table equals schema underscore log, and I'll just revert this so that I can get proper data and successful execution. Save this as well, go in here, delete, refresh and start. Refresh, you can see here the table name has been renamed, and also successful migration. Alright, the final thing, can I rename or can I place my SQL files in some other location? Like by default we have this DB, and within DB migration we can do that. What we have to do for that is spring dot flyway dot locations equals, what I'm going to do is DB class path slash DB slash flyway, and I'll create a new directory, flyway, move everything to flyway and delete. Okay, and let me do these two as well. Start. Application has started successfully, and you can see the changes. Yeah. And if you want to have database specific queries, yeah, one more thing, you can have only either SQL queries and the Java migration. Other than these two types, it doesn't support, and hence if you have different databases for different clients, then you should have to write the SQL queries for each of those clients explicitly, and in these cases I don't see the Java migration to be a fruitful one. That is one thing, and again you need to have all the migration queries for, suppose for example, MariaDB as well as for Oracle as an example. I think that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.